I typed 1,000 words, then deleted them. That was my revenge. But before I get to that supremely satisfying moment of digital destruction, let me tell you about Marcus Chen, the man who could gaslight a lighthouse. We met at a coffee shop, which should have been my first red flag. Not because coffee shops are inherently suspicious, but because he was wearing sunglasses indoors and told me it was because he was allergic to fluorescent lighting. Reader, there were no fluorescent lights. It was all Edison bulbs and carefully curated industrial chic. But I laughed, charmed by what I thought was quirky humor. Spoiler alert, it was not humor. It was foreshadowing. Marcus was a freelance creative consultant, which I later discovered meant he occasionally designed logos for his cousin's pressure washing business and spent the rest of his time perfecting his cryptocurrency day trading strategy, which was going incredibly well despite him borrowing $40 from me every other week for just until his funds cleared. Those funds had been clearing for 8 months when we broke up. I'm pretty sure they're still pending somewhere in the financial ether. Right next to my self-respect, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning, back when I still thought love bombing was something terrorists did. Not something that happened to you when a reasonably attractive man with good hair paid attention to you for 3 consecutive weeks. My name is Sadie Walsh. I'm 29 years old and I'm a high school English teacher, which means I should have seen the red flags in Marcus's texts. When someone writes "you're so beautiful" instead of "you're so beautiful," there's a 90% chance they're going to disappoint you. When they follow it up with "I could care less what other people think" instead of "I couldn't care less," that percentage jumps to 98. The remaining 2% is margin of error, but love, or whatever passes for it in the early stages, makes you ignore your own curriculum. I spent entire class periods teaching my students about unreliable narrators while completely missing that I was dating one. Marcus swept me off my feet with the kind of intensity that romance novels promised, but real life rarely delivered. He texted me good morning every single day. He sent me playlists. He showed up at my apartment with takeout when I mentioned I'd had a hard day. He remembered that I liked extra pickles. Extra pickles! Do you understand how intoxicating that is? To be seen, to be remembered. Of course, I later realized he was doing this because he'd just been dumped by his ex-girlfriend of 4 years and was filling the gaping void in his life with the first reasonably attractive woman who made eye contact with him at a coffee shop. But in the moment, it felt like fate. "I've never met anyone like you," he told me on our 3rd date, which should have been another red flag because how many people had he actually met? He was 32 and lived in the same neighborhood where he grew up. But instead of seeing this as a lack of life experience, I saw it as being grounded and valuing community. Reader, he still hung out with his friends from high school exclusively. They called themselves the Wolf Pack, unironically, and had a group chat where they mostly sent each other memes about how women be shopping. I met the Wolf Pack on week 4. There was Jason, who worked at a vape shop and had strong opinions about Joe Rogan. There was Tyler, who introduced himself as an entrepreneur but was actually drop-shipping fidget spinners from China in 2024. And there was Brad, who didn't seem to have a personality beyond agreeing with whatever Jason said and occasionally mentioning his fantasy football league. "The guys loved you," Marcus told me afterward, as if I'd auditioned for a part in their terrible ensemble cast. "Brad said you were pretty chill for a teacher. I should have run. I should have blocked his number, burned sage, and enrolled in therapy. Instead, I said, 'That's nice,' and let Marcus stay over. This is how it begins, you know? Not with obvious villainy, but with small compromises. With letting things slide because you don't want to be that girlfriend who makes everything a big deal. With convincing yourself that your standards are too high. That you're being too sensitive. That love means accepting someone's flaws. Except Marcus's flaws weren't like normal flaws. They were more like personality quicksand. By month 2, the good morning texts became sporadic. When I mentioned it, Marcus looked at me like I'd asked him to explain quantum physics. "Babe, I'm not a morning person. You know that." I did not know that. He had literally been texting me every morning for 6 weeks. "But sure, Marcus, you're not a morning person." My mistake. The takeout dates became Netflix and chill at his apartment, which was fine, except his apartment was actually his childhood bedroom in his parents' house. And Netflix and chill meant watching him play video games, while I sat on a beanbag chair that smelled faintly of Axe body spray and broken dreams. "My parents are cool with it," he assured me when I gently suggested that maybe, at 32, he might want to consider getting his own place. Why would I pay rent when I can save money here? That's just basic financial literacy. Sadie, Marcus was very into basic financial literacy, which was ironic considering he'd once bought a sword from a late-night infomercial because it was an investment piece. But the real problems started around month 3, right after I made the catastrophic mistake of telling Marcus I loved him. We were at Olive Garden because he had a gift card. And I was feeling soft and stupid after 2 glasses of their remarkably terrible house wine. The words just tumbled out. Sincere and unguarded. "I think I'm falling in love with you." Marcus looked at me, put down his breadstick, and said, "That's really intense." Sadie, not "I love you too." Not even "I'm getting there." Just an observation about my emotional intensity, delivered with the same tone you'd use to say that's really spicy salsa. "I just mean I really care about you." I backtracked, immediately regretting every decision that had led me to this moment. "I get it," Marcus said. picking up his breadstick again. You're a very emotional person. It's one of the things I like about you. Reader, I am not a particularly emotional person. I'm a high school English teacher. I once watched a student present a PowerPoint on Hamlet, where every slide was just a different picture of Hamlet screaming. And I didn't even flinch. But according to Marcus, I was very emotional, which I would come to learn was his code for having any feelings whatsoever that might require him to acknowledge reality. After the Olive Garden incident, things shifted. Marcus became more distant but also somehow more demanding. He'd go days without texting, then show up at my apartment unannounced and act hurt that I wasn't more excited to see him. He'd make plans, then cancel at the last minute, then get irritated when I made backup plans. I feel like you're not prioritizing us, he said once. After canceling our dinner plans so he could go to Jason's birthday party, which was apparently a surprise party that Jason had planned for himself. Then getting upset that I'd gone to the movies with my friend Rachel instead of sitting at home waiting for him. You canceled our plans, I pointed out. Very reasonably, I thought. But I didn't think you'd just make other plans immediately. That's cold, Sadie. This is what gaslighting sounds like, by the way. Not a villain twirling a mustache and saying, I'm going to manipulate you now. It's someone making you feel crazy for having perfectly reasonable reactions to their unreasonable behavior. Month 4 brought a new development. Marcus's ex-girlfriend, Nessa. I'd known she existed in the abstract, the way you know that your boyfriend had a life before you met him. But suddenly Vanessa was everywhere. In his phone notifications, in his stories, in his excuses. Sorry, I couldn't call you back last night. Vanessa had an emergency and needed to talk. Can you hang out tomorrow? I promised Vanessa I'd help her move a bookshelf. Vanessa sent me this funny meme. You'd love it. Then he'd show me a meme that was aggressively unfunny, and I'd have to pretend to laugh while internally screaming when I finally asked about Vanessa. With what I thought was admirable calm, Marcus acted like I'd accused him of treason. Sadie, just wow. So I'm not allowed to have female friends now. That's really controlling. I didn't say that. I just think it's weird that you're spending more time with your ex-girlfriend than with your actual girlfriend. She's not my ex-girlfriend. She's my friend who I used to date. There's a difference. Reader, there is not a difference. Or if there is, it's a difference without distinction. Like the difference between borrowing money and taking money with no intention of ever paying it back. But Marcus was good at this, at taking my legitimate concerns and twisting them until I was the one apologizing. By the end of the conversation, I'd somehow agreed that I was being insecure and jealous and needed to work on my trust issues. Never mind that Marcus had given me approximately 7,000 reasons not to trust him. Never mind that trust issues is what manipulators call pattern recognition. My friend Rachel saw through it immediately. Rachel is a divorce attorney, which means she has a PhD in recognizing bullshit. "He's gaslighting you," she said flatly over brunch. After I'd finished a 20-minute explanation of why maybe I was being too sensitive about the Vanessa thing. "He's not gaslighting me," I said, "gaslighting myself." "Sadie, sweetie, light of my life. He's doing the thing where he makes you feel crazy for noticing that he's acting shady. That's literally the definition of gaslighting." Maybe I am being too sensitive. Rachel put down her mimosa and looked at me with the kind of pity usually reserved for people who still think they're going to win the lottery. "Honey, you teach high school. You deal with actual teenagers having actual hormone-fueled meltdowns every single day, and you handle it like a champion. You're not too sensitive. He's too manipulative." I wanted to believe her. But believing her would mean admitting that I'd wasted 4 months on someone who wasn't worth 4 minutes. It would mean accepting that the person I'd fallen for didn't actually exist. That I'd been in love with a carefully constructed facade designed to get me invested before revealing the disappointing reality underneath. So instead, I doubled down. I made excuses. I tried harder. I convinced myself that if I could just be cooler, more understanding, less intense, then Marcus would go back to being the person he'd pretended to be in those first few weeks. Spoiler alert. He did not. Month 5 brought the piece de resistance of Marcus's manipulation, the birthday incident. My birthday, to be clear, the big 3-0, which I'd been mildly dreading because 30 feels like it should come with some kind of life achievement unlocked. And I was still struggling to keep my houseplants alive. Marcus had made a big deal about planning something special. "Don't make any plans," he'd said mysteriously. "I've got it all handled."
A reader.
He did not have it all handled. My birthday fell on a Saturday. I woke up to no text from Marcus, which was fine, I told myself. He's probably just sleeping in. By noon, still nothing. I texted him, "Hey, still on for tonight." 3 hours later, "Oh shit, babe, I'm so sorry. The guy surprised me with tickets to the game." Rain check. The game. The game. Marcus had forgotten my birthday and instead gone to watch grown men throw a ball around while I sat alone in my apartment, wearing the new dress I'd bought specifically for whatever special thing he'd supposedly planned. When I called him, hurt and angry, he had the audacity to say, "Come on, Sadie, don't be like this. You're acting like I killed your dog. It's just a birthday. You have one every year. You specifically told me you had something planned. Said I'd try to plan something. You must have misheard." Had not misheard. I had text receipts. But Marcus had an answer for everything. Those texts don't say I definitely planned something. You're reading into them. You literally said I've got it all handled. Yeah, I had it handled. I handled it by going to the game. I handled my own plans. This conversation lasted 45 minutes and ended with me crying and Marcus telling me I was ruining his night by being upset. He eventually agreed to come over after the game, then never showed up. When I texted him at midnight asking where he was, he responded the next morning with "fell asleep, lol." Fell asleep, lol, oh. Rachel wanted to drive to his parents' house and commit what she called justifiable homicide. I talked her down, but mostly because I was too tired to help hide a body. This is it, right? Rachel said. You're done. I should have been done. Any reasonable person would have been done. But I was deep in the sunk cost fallacy, convinced that if I just gave it a little more time, if I could just make him understand how much he'd hurt me, he'd apologize properly and we'd move forward. Instead, when I tried to have a serious conversation about my birthday, Marcus said, I feel like you're being really unfair. I said I was sorry. What more do you want from me? I want you to actually be sorry. I am sorry. I'm sorry you feel hurt. I'm sorry you're choosing to let this ruin our relationship. I'm sorry you can't just let things go and be happy. Do you see what he did there? He apologized for my feelings, not his actions. He made it my fault for choosing to be hurt, as if being forgotten on your birthday is just a matter of perspective. He framed my entirely reasonable expectation of basic consideration as me being unable to let things go. But here's the thing about gaslighting. It's effective. After enough of these conversations, you start to doubt your own reality. You start thinking maybe you are too sensitive, too demanding, too intense. Maybe your expectations are unreasonable. Maybe you should be grateful that he's with you at all. Given how difficult you're being, I started apologizing for things that weren't my fault. I stopped bringing up things that bothered me because it was easier than dealing with the circular arguments that went nowhere. I made myself smaller and quieter, convinced that if I could just be easier to love, he'd love me the way I needed. Month 6 brought what I call the gallery opening incident, which sounds fancy but was actually just my friend Emma's art show at a local gallery. Emma had been working on this show for a year, and I'd promised I'd be there. Marcus knew about it. I'd mentioned it multiple times. I'd even bought a new blazer for it, 'cause Emma's art friends are intimidatingly cool, and I wanted to look like someone who understands postmodern deconstructionism, even though I absolutely do not. The day of the opening, Marcus asked if he could come. Course. I said, genuinely excited. This would be the first time Marcus met my art world friends, and despite everything, I still had this stupid hope that if he met the people who mattered to me, he'd start taking our relationship more seriously. Cool, he said. What time? It starts at 7. but we should get there by 7:15. Can we do 7:30? The guys want to grab dinner first. The guys. The guys. The wolf pack had somehow become the central organizing principle of Marcus's entire existence. And by extension, mine. The opening is only 2 hours, I said carefully. If we don't get there until 7:30, we'll barely have any time there. So we'll stay until 9:30. What's the problem? The problem was that I'd told Emma I'd be there early to help her greet people and manage her nerves. The problem was that this was important to me. And Marcus was treating it like an obligation to squeeze in between his actual priorities. But I didn't say any of that because I was tired of being difficult. "Okay," I said. 7:30. Marcus showed up at 8, alone. "Where are the guys?" I asked, confused. "Oh, they decided not to come. They're not really into art." He'd made me wait so he could have dinner with his friends, who then didn't even come. We'd missed half the opening. Emma gave me a look that clearly said, "Why are you with this person?" And I had no good answer. But the real kicker came when we got to the gallery. Marcus spent the entire time on his phone, barely looking at Emma's paintings, which were actually incredibly large-scale abstract pieces about intergenerational trauma that made you feel things you didn't have words for. "This is cool," Marcus said, glancing up briefly at a canvas that Emma had spent 3 months on. "Kind of looks like my nephew's finger paintings, though. Reader?" I wanted to push him into the sculpture installation. Emma, to her credit, just smiled tightly and excused herself to talk to actual art appreciators. Later, when we were saying goodbye, she hugged me extra long and whispered, "You deserve better." The ride home was silent. Marcus was texting someone, chuckling at his phone, completely oblivious to the fact that he'd been incredibly rude. When we got back to my apartment, he assumed he was staying over. "Actually, I'm pretty tired," I said. "Maybe tonight's not the best night." Marcus looked at me like I'd suggested we join a cult. "Are you serious right now?" "I just need some space to think." "About what?" "About how you're going to punish me for what?" "Exactly." "For showing up to your friend's thing. For being supportive. You were on your phone the entire time. You barely looked at her art. You insulted her work." "I said it looked like finger painting." "That's not an insult. That's an observation. You're being so sensitive about this." And there it was again. Me being sensitive for having feelings. Me being unreasonable for expecting basic courtesy. Me always the problem. Never him. We argued for another hour, and somehow I ended up apologizing again. He stayed over. I lay awake next to him, listening to him snore, wondering how I'd become someone I didn't recognize. The next morning, Rachel texted me, "We need to talk." We met for coffee. and Rachel came armed with what she called evidence. I know you're going to say I'm overstepping, she started. But I'm worried about you, so I'm overstepping anyway. She pulled out her phone and showed me screenshots. Marcus's Instagram follows, his recent likes, his comments on other women's posts, lots of fire emojis, lots of looking good comments, and lots of interactions with Vanessa. They're still together, Rachel said gently. Or they're getting back together. Or they never really broke up. I don't know the details, but Sadie, this is not the behavior of someone who's committed to you. Felt sick. Not surprised, exactly, but sick. Because deep down, I'd known something was wrong. I'd felt it in the way Marcus kept me separate from certain parts of his life. In the way he'd never posted a single photo of us together. In the way he got defensive whenever I asked basic questions about his day. I need to talk to him, I said. Or, Rachel suggested, you could just block him and move on with your life. But I couldn't do that. Not yet. I needed closure. I needed answers. I needed him to admit what he'd done, to acknowledge the lies, to take responsibility for once in his life. Reader, I was an idiot. That evening, I went to Marcus's parents' house. His mom answered the door, looking uncomfortable. Oh, Sadie, Marcus didn't mention you were coming by. Is he here? He's in his room. With a friend. The friend was Vanessa. They weren't doing anything inappropriate when I opened his bedroom door, just sitting on his bed. Laptop between them, looking at what appeared to be vacation photos. But the intimacy of it, the ease, the way they startled when they saw me told me everything I needed to know. Sadie, Marcus said, standing up quickly. What are you doing here? What is she doing here? I countered, pointing at Vanessa. We're just hanging out. Since when do I need your permission to have friends over? Vanessa, to her credit, looked mortified. I should go, she said quietly. No, stay, I said. I have some questions for both of you. Are you two together? No. Marcus said too quickly. Too loudly. Vanessa looked at the floor. It's complicated. It's not complicated, I said, surprised by how calm I sounded. Either you're together or you're not. We're figuring things out, Vanessa said, finally. We broke up, but we've been talking about maybe trying again. I didn't know he had a girlfriend. He said you were just someone he was casually seeing. 6 months. Meeting his friends. Sleeping over multiple times a week. Casually seeing. I looked at Marcus, waiting for him to deny it, to explain, to do something other than stand there looking like a kid caught cheating on a test. Sadie, let me explain. Don't, I said. Just don't. Walked out. I heard Marcus following me, heard him calling my name, but I didn't stop. I got in my car, drove home, and then proceeded to have the most pathetic cry of my adult life. The kind where you're not even making sounds anymore. Just sort of vibrating with misery. Rachel came over with wine and ice cream. Emma brought a weighted blanket and rage. Together, they helped me through that first awful night of realizing I'd wasted 6 months on someone who'd never seen me as a priority, who'd lied to me, who'd made me doubt my own sanity to cover his own bad behavior. But the worst part, Marcus still thought he'd done nothing wrong. The texts started almost immediately. Sadie, you're overreacting. Can we please talk about this like adults? I'm sorry you're upset, but you're not being fair. Vanessa and I have history. You're acting crazy right now. This is why we have problems you never let me explain. I can't believe you're throwing away what we had over nothing. Each text was a masterclass in manipulation. Each one found a new way to make it my fault, my overreaction, my unfairness, my craziness, my inability to listen. And here's the shameful part. I almost responded. I almost let him pull me back in. Because after 6 months of being told your instincts are wrong, your feelings are invalid, your reactions are excessive, you start to believe it. You start to think maybe you are the problem. Maybe you should give him another chance. Maybe you're throwing away something good over a misunderstanding. That's when I decided to write the message. The message. The one that would explain everything. That would make him understand exactly what he'd done, how he'd hurt me, how fundamentally unfair he'd been. I'd lay it all out logically, calmly, with receipts and examples, and he'd finally get it. He'd see what he'd lost. He'd realize his mistakes. I opened my phone and started typing. Marcus, I need you to understand what the past 6 months have been like from my perspective. I need you to see how your actions affected me, how your lies hurt me, how your manipulation made me doubt myself in ways I've never doubted myself before. Typed for an hour. Then 2. Then 3. It was after midnight when I finally stopped, staring at a message that had ballooned to over 1,000 words, single-spaced with bullet points. I'd included specific examples, dates, screenshots. I'd analyzed his behavior patterns. I'd explained gaslighting techniques he'd used, probably with more academic rigor than necessary. But I'm an English teacher. Citation is my love language. I detailed the birthday incident, the gallery opening, the Vanessa situation. I explained how each small thing compounded into a larger pattern of disrespect and manipulation. I pointed out the contradictions in his stories, the ways he'd moved goalposts, the double standards he'd employed. It was comprehensive. It was devastating. It was airtight. It was also completely pointless. I sat there, thumb hovering over the send button, reading and rereading my dissertation on his failures. And then I had a moment of clarity. He knew. Of course he knew. He knew when he forgot my birthday. He knew when he showed up late to the gallery. He knew when he kept me and Vanessa separate, feeding us different stories. He knew when he lied, when he manipulated, when he knew all of it. He just didn't care. And no message, no matter how articulate or well-reasoned, was going to make him care. I couldn't logic someone into empathy. I couldn't cite my way into an apology. I couldn't explain myself into mattering to someone who'd already decided. I didn't. Sending this message wouldn't give me closure, it would just give him ammunition. He'd pick apart my arguments. He'd twist my words. He'd find the one sentence that was slightly ambiguous and use it to invalidate everything else. He'd tell me I was attacking him, being cruel, holding grudges. He'd make himself the victim of my very reasonable attempt to make him see reality. Or worse, he'd ignore it entirely. He'd read it, maybe skim it, then respond with K, or you're being dramatic, or just not respond at all. And I'd be left obsessively checking my phone, wondering if he'd seen it. Waiting for validation that would never come. Either way, I'd lose. That's the thing about arguing with manipulators. The only winning move is not to play. So I did something that felt, in the moment, more powerful than anything I'd ever done. I deleted it. All 1,000+ words. All the carefully constructed arguments. All the evidence. All the pain, gone. Then I blocked his number. Blocked him on Instagram. On Facebook. On Venmo, because why was I still connected to him on Venmo? I blocked the Wolfpack too, for good measure. If I never saw another one of Jason's Joe Rogan retweets, it would be too soon. I didn't explain myself. I didn't announce my decision. I didn't give him a chance to respond or argue or manipulate his way back in. I just disappeared and reader. It felt amazing. The first week was hard. I kept reaching for my phone, muscle memory demanding I check if he'd texted. But he couldn't text. I'd blocked him. Every time I remembered that, I felt a little surge of satisfaction. Rachel was proud. You're doing the thing, she kept saying. You're choosing yourself. Emma made me a playlist titled Songs to Delete Men By, which was mostly Lizzo and Beyoncé, and one inexplicable Dolly Parton deep cut that absolutely slapped. My students noticed I seemed happier. Ms. Walsh, you're like glowing, said Brianna Chen, my most perceptive junior. Did you get a facial or something? I got rid of dead weight, I told her, like through exercise. Something like that. Week 2 brought the flying monkeys. First, Jason texted me, "Hey Marcus, wanted me to tell you he's sorry and wants to talk." I blocked Jason, then Tyler. "I'd what happened between you and Marcus, but Hayes really torn up about it." Blocked. Brad didn't bother texting, which honestly tracked. Marcus's mom friend requested me on Facebook, which was weird, but I accepted because she'd always been nice to me. She sent me a message. "I don't know what happened between you and Marcus, but I want you to know I always liked you." You seem too good for him anyway. Mrs. Chen coming through with the validation I didn't know I needed. Week 3, Marcus tried a different approach. He created a new Instagram account to get around my block and sent me a DM. Sadie, this is childish. We need to talk. I deserve an explanation. He deserved an explanation. He deserved an explanation. The audacity was almost impressive. I screenshotted it, sent it to the group chat, and blocked the new account. Rachel responded with the lion, the witch, the audacity of this bitch. Emma sent the gif of Mariah Carey saying I don't know her. My spine was getting stronger. I could feel it by week 4. I'd stop thinking about Marcus every hour. It became every few hours. Then just a few times a day. The phantom phone checks decreased. I stopped mentally composing comeback texts. I started doing things I'd stopped doing while dating him. I went to Emma's studio and tried painting, which I was terrible at but found cathartic. I joined Rachel for her spin class, which I was also terrible at, but which made me feel like a slightly stronger version of myself. I started reading for pleasure again, instead of just for lesson planning. I went on dates with myself. Movies alone. Restaurants alone. I'd been so afraid of looking pathetic eating dinner by myself, but it turned out nobody cared. Everyone was too busy with their own lives to judge mine. And even if they did judge, so what? Their opinions didn't determine my worth. Month 2 post Marcus, I ran into Vanessa at Target. We both froze in the home goods aisle, each of us holding decorative throw pillows like shields. Sadie, she said finally. Hi. Awkward silence. Somewhere a child was screaming about wanting a toy. It felt appropriate. Look, Vanessa said, I owe you an apology. I didn't know about you, not really. Marcus told me you were just casual. But even if that were true, I should have verified before. Anyway, I'm sorry. I could have been cold. I could have said something cutting. But looking at her, I just felt tired. And a little sad. For both of us. Are you two back together? I asked. She laughed bitterly. We were, for like 3 weeks. Then I found out he was also talking to some girl he met at a bar. So, no, we're not together. I finally learned what I apparently needed to learn. Marcus doesn't change. He just finds new people to disappoint. How are you doing? I asked, and meant it. Getting there? You? Same. We stood there for a moment, 2 women who'd both been lied to by the same mediocre man, bonding over throw pillows and betrayal. For what it's worth, Vanessa said, you dodged a bullet. He's exhausting. And his friends are the worst. I laughed. The wolf pack is truly something else. Vanessa said, oh my God, I forgot about that. They're in their 30s. We ended up getting coffee. Not to become best friends or anything, but to compare notes, to validate each other's experiences, to reassure each other that we weren't crazy. He really was that manipulative. He once told me I was jealous of his relationship with his mom, Vanessa said, because I asked why he still let her do his laundry. He told me I was controlling because I wanted him to text me when he was going to be more than an hour late. Did he ever do the thing where he'd pick a fight right before something important to you, then act like you were ruining it by being upset? Yes. Oh my God, yes. I thought that was just me. Comparing notes with Vanessa was weirdly healing. It confirmed that I wasn't too sensitive, too demanding, to anything. Marcus was just someone who saw relationships as something to win rather than something to nurture, who treated partners as NPCs in his life story rather than full people with their own needs and feelings. We didn't become close friends. The Marcus connection was too weird for that, but we followed each other on Instagram and occasionally liked each other's posts. A tiny alliance forged from shared disappointment. Month 3, I went on an actual date with a real human man who asked me questions about myself and seemed genuinely interested in the answers. His name was David. He was a marine biologist, and he had his own apartment. The bar was in hell, but he cleared it easily. I told him I was recently out of a relationship, and he said, "That's okay. We can take things slow." Reader, I nearly cried. The idea of taking things slow, of not rushing into intense feelings and big commitments, of just getting to know someone without immediately sacrificing my entire identity. It was revolutionary. David and I went on for dates before he even tried to kiss me. When he did, he asked first, "Would it be okay if I kissed you?" "You don't have to ask," I said. "Huh," he said. But I wanted to. Consent is sexy, it turns out. Who knew? Things with David didn't work out long term. Turned out we wanted different things in life. And he was kind enough to tell me that directly, instead of gaslighting me about it for 6 months. We parted ways amicably. I didn't even cry. I just thought, okay, and moved on. That's when I realized I'd healed. Not completely healing isn't linear and all that, but enough. Enough to recognize healthy behavior. Enough to walk away from unhealthy behavior. Enough to know my worth wasn't determined by whether someone else saw it. Month 6 post-Marcus. I was at a teacher conference when I saw him. He was there with Jason, apparently attending some entrepreneurship seminar in the same hotel. He looked the same hair, same smirk, same energy of someone who thought he was more interesting than he actually was. He saw me. And I watched him calculate whether to approach. I could see it in his eyes. Part of him, Wanta,